My name is Rebecca Lane. I'm 34 years old. At 6:41 on a Saturday evening, a woman I had never met called me and said, "I think I bought your mother's piano." I was standing in the frozen food aisle of Miller's grocery, holding a bag of peas I did not want, trying to remember whether I had eaten lunch, when those 7 words made the world narrow down to the hum of the freezer case, and the phone pressed against my ear. My mother had been dead for 19 days. 19 days since I sat beside her hospital bed and watched the monitor flatten into a line no daughter is ever ready to see. 19 days since my stepfather Grant told me, "Your mother wouldn't want us making a museum out of the house." 19 days since I asked him, very clearly, not to touch the piano until we could go through Mom's things together. The piano was not valuable to most people. An upright Baldwin, walnut finish, built sometime in the 1970s, with one sticky middle C, a chipped corner on the fallboard, and a faint water ring from the mug of chamomile tea. Mom used to balance there during late-night practice. But to me, it was my mother, her hands on the keys at dawn, her voice humming under hymns, her laugh when I played wrong notes confidently, her perfume caught in the bench cushion, her sheet music marked in pencil, her foot tapping the sustain pedal while she taught me that music did not have to be perfect to be true. When I was 8, I crawled underneath it during a thunderstorm with a butter knife I had stolen from the kitchen drawer and carved my name into the underside of the wooden frame. Rebecca. Crooked. Too deep in some places. Barely visible in others. Mom found me under there with wood shavings on my shirt and the guilty face of a child who had not yet learned to lie well. She looked at the carving. Then at me. Then and said, "Well, I suppose now we know whose piano this is." I burst into tears because I thought she would be angry. She crawled under the piano beside me, ridiculous and elegant in her blue robe, and added a tiny heart beside my name with the tip of the butter knife. "There," she said, "a contract." From then on, she called it our contract piano. "When I'm old," she would say, "and my fingers are too stubborn to cooperate, this goes to you." "You'll never be old," I told her once. She laughed. "Then I suppose you'll have to wait forever." I would have waited forever if forever had been offered. Instead, my stepfather sold it before the sympathy cards stopped arriving. The woman on the phone cleared her throat gently. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. I bought an upright piano this morning from a man named Grant Whitmore. He said it belonged to his late wife." I leaned against the freezer door. My reflection stared back at me, pale and strange between frozen waffles and ice cream. "Yes," I said. "Grant was married to my mother. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." There was a pause. Emily continued. "My husband and I were moving it into our house, and one of the movers noticed something carved underneath. A name. Rebecca. And a little heart." The bag of peas slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I did not pick it up. Emily's voice softened. "I looked through the bench before calling. There was an old recital program inside, with your name and your mother's name. Margaret Lane. I found your number through a local directory and hoped I wasn't overstepping." I closed my eyes. The recital program. Mom had kept every single one. Even the terrible 5th grade winter recital where I played Greensleeves too fast and bowed in the wrong direction. "Where is the piano now?" I asked. "At my house. We haven't tuned it or moved it farther than the front room. I didn't feel right keeping it without asking." My throat closed. Grant had not called me, had not texted, had not asked, had not even waited until after the small memorial service we had planned for the following weekend. Because Mom did not want a funeral. She wanted music and cake, and no one saying I fought bravely, because I did not fight Rebecca, I endured. He had sold the piano like it was furniture, like it was clutter, like Mom's promise to me had been erased the moment he became the only person left with a house key. I asked Emily how much she paid. She hesitated. $800. I almost laughed, not because the amount was small, because Grant had sold my mother's voice for less than he spent on the new golf clubs he bought the year before. "I'll pay you back," I said. "No," Emily said quickly. "That's not why I called." "I know, but I will. Rebecca, maybe come see it first." I opened my eyes. People walked past with carts. A child asked for cereal. A store employee looked at the peas on the floor and then at me, unsure whether the frozen vegetables were the emergency. I picked them up and placed them back in the freezer because even grief has strange manners. "I can come tonight," I said. Emily gave me her address. Then she added, "There's something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" He gave me a box with the bench, said it was just old music. I haven't gone through it fully, but some of it looks personal. Letters, photos, maybe journals. I gripped the phone. "Please don't let him come back for anything." "I won't." "Please don't give him the piano." "I won't." I stood there under fluorescent lights, with my mother's name burning behind my eyes, and understood something with perfect clarity. Grant had not just sold the piano. He had tried to sell the proof that it was mine. He had forgotten that when a child carves her name into wood, sometimes the past leaves evidence where greedy men do not think to look. This is that story. Before I tell you how my stepfather learned that selling a dead woman's piano is harder when her daughter's name is carved underneath, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears stories like this while remembering the object someone tried to take, because they thought love did not leave paperwork. And if you connect with stories about women who were dismissed, betrayed, erased, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some women do not scream over sold heirlooms. Some women answer the buyer's call and follow the carving home. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, in a little white house with green shutters, a lilac bush by the porch, and a piano in the front room that made our house feel warmer than the furnace ever did. My mother, Margaret Lane, taught elementary music for 29 years. She had soft brown hair, patient hands, and the ability to make a room full of 7-year-olds sing in tune by raising one eyebrow. She believed children should learn music before they learned embarrassment. She believed sad days needed soup. She believed you should never clap between movements, but you should always clap for children, even if the song collapsed somewhere near the bridge. My father died when I was 6. Car accident. Fog. A truck driver who survived and sent flowers every year until I was 18. I do not remember enough of my father to build a whole man. I remember his laugh, the smell of sawdust, the way he lifted me onto his shoulders to reach apples from the tree behind our house. Mom remembered everything else for both of us, until I was old enough to understand that remembering had cost her. After Dad died, the piano became the second heartbeat in our house. Mom played when she missed him, Bach when she needed order, Joni Mitchell when she made soup, hymns when she thought I was asleep, old jazz standards on Friday nights while she graded papers. When I cried because other kids had fathers at school events, she sat beside me on the piano bench and played the lowest notes, one at a time, until I laughed and said it sounded like thunder wearing shoes. That was my mother. She did not fix grief. She sat beside it and gave it a tune. Grant Whitmore entered our lives when I was 13. He worked in commercial insurance, wore expensive cologne, and had the kind of smile adults call charming and children distrust without having language for it. He met Mom at a charity fundraiser where she organized the student choir. He complimented her voice, then her dress, then her strength. That last one worked because widows hear strength so often it becomes a cage, and when someone says it softly enough, it can sound like rescue. At first, I wanted her to be happy. I really did. She had spent 7 years being both parents, both incomes, both comforter and rule-maker. She deserved dinners where someone else made the reservation. She deserved flowers not arranged by a funeral home. She deserved to be admired by someone who did not need help with homework afterward. But Grant did not admire her life. He admired the version of her he thought he could polish. He called our house quaint. He said Mom's teaching salary was more meaningful than practical. He referred to her sheet music collection as organized chaos. The first time he heard her playing at 7 on a Saturday morning, he walked into the kitchen and said, "Does the piano always start this early?" Mom laughed. "Yes." He smiled thinly. "I'll adapt." He did not. After they married when I was 15, he moved into our house and began calling it the property. The property needs updated lighting. The property could use a cleaner entryway. The property has too much sentimental clutter. Sentimental clutter, that was Grant's phrase for anything he did not own emotionally. My father's workbench, Mom's recital programs, the chipped blue mixing bowl, the piano. especially the piano. It takes up half the front room, he said one evening, standing with a glass of red wine where my father used to read. Mom was arranging sheet music. It takes up exactly the space it needs. It's old. So am I, apparently. He smiled, but his jaw tightened. Margaret, I'm just saying a newer console would look cleaner. Mom looked at him over her glasses. Grant, if you ever replace my piano, I'll haunt you in 3-4 time. I laughed from the hallway. Grant did not. The symbolic object in this story was not only the piano, it was the carving underneath. Rebecca and the tiny heart. Our contract. After Mom found me under there, she never sanded it down or scolded me again. Sometimes, when Grant complained that the piano made the room feel dated, Mom would look at me and tap 2 fingers against the underside as if signing the contract again. He never noticed. Men like Grant rarely look underneath things. They prefer surfaces. I left for college at 18, but the piano remained my emotional address. When I came home for holidays, I played terribly for the first hour, then better. Mom would cook while I stumbled through old pieces. She never corrected unless I asked. After college, I moved to Des Moines and became a graphic designer for a publishing company. I made a life. Apartment, friends, deadlines, a long-term boyfriend who became an ex after deciding, quote, creative people are unstable, which was rich from a man who lost his keys twice a week. Mom and I talked every Sunday, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. She always asked, "Are you playing?" I had a keyboard in my apartment. I would say, "A little." She would say, "A little counts." Grant became more tolerable with distance, or maybe easier to ignore. He was polite on phone calls, generous with Christmas checks, and careful to praise my work in ways that sounded supportive if you did not hear the faint surprise underneath. Rebecca actually makes a good living with design, he told his brother once at Thanksgiving. Actually, Mom heard it and kicked him under the table. I loved her for that. The first time Mom said the piano would be mine in front of Grant, I was 27. We were washing dishes after Christmas dinner. Grant was in the living room watching a game too loudly. Mom handed me a plate and said, "When I'm gone, you take the piano." Mom. What? Don't say when you're gone while I'm holding a wet plate. She smiled. I'm serious. I know. It goes to you, not a sale. Not storage, not some estate nonsense. You. Grant called from the living room. That thing will cost more to move than it's worth. Mom dried her hands and walked to the doorway. It's worth exactly what I say it is. He muted the television. I'm only being practical. No, she said, you're being Grant. I nearly dropped the plate. Grant looked offended. Mom returned to the sink, calm as Sunday. That was her way. She rarely raised her voice. She did not need to. 5 years later, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. By then, I was 32. Grant handled the diagnosis like a manager assigned an inconvenient project. He scheduled appointments, argued with billing departments, researched treatment centers, and complained about parking. He did many useful things. I will not pretend he did not. But usefulness without tenderness has edges. Mom would call me after chemo and whisper, "He means well." I hated that phrase. It was what women said when they were trying to make someone's lack of softness easier to swallow. I drove home as often as I could. Every other weekend at first, then every weekend. Then remote work from Mom's guest room, when treatment became harder. The piano grew quieter. Not silent, never silent, but quieter. Her fingers hurt, neuropathy, fatigue, nausea. The betrayal of her own body. Some days she sat at the bench and only played scales with one hand. A little counts, I reminded her. She smiled. Bossy child. Grant started talking about simplifying the house during her second round of treatment. We should think ahead, he said one afternoon while Mom slept. I stood in the kitchen making tea. Think ahead to what? Maintenance, space. What happens to things? I looked at him. What things? He leaned against the counter. Rebecca, your mother has a lot of belongings. Instruments, books, papers, clothes. It would be easier to make decisions while she can still give input. That sounded reasonable. Almost. I said, she already gave input on the piano. His face tightened. The piano is not practical. There's that word? It's expensive to move, hard to place, and you live in an apartment. I'll move it when the time comes. He sighed. You're being sentimental. Yes. He blinked, unprepared for agreement. I continued. Sentiment is allowed when someone is dying. He looked away. We don't know that she's dying. We did. Not that day, maybe. But the knowledge had entered the house and sat down. Mom declined over 14 months. Hospital stays. Treatment changes. Good weeks. Bad weeks. The cruel hope of temporary improvement. The quiet devastation of markers rising again. In her final month, she moved into a hospital bed in the front room because she wanted to be near the piano. Grant wanted it in the den. Mom said no. She wants the room open, he told me. Mom opened one eye. I am she, and she wants the piano. I laughed. Grant did not. One evening, 3 weeks before she died, she asked me to help her to the bench. She was so thin by then I could feel every bone through her cardigan. I said, Mom, maybe tomorrow. No. Okay. I helped her sit. Grant hovered in the doorway. She placed her hands on the keys and played the first few measures of Clair de Lune. Slow, imperfect, beautiful enough to ruin me. Then she stopped. My hands are stupid. I sat beside her. They're tired. She looked at me. Promise me you'll take it. I promise. Grant will say it's too much trouble. I know. He'll say I changed my mind. My eyes filled. Did you? No. She lifted her hand and pointed down. Our contract is under there. I laughed through tears. Yes. Grant said from the doorway, Margaret, don't make Rebecca feel obligated. Mom turned her head slowly. Grant, I have loved you, but that piano was promised before you learned which drawer held the spoons. He went still. She continued, breath weak but voice clear. It goes to Rebecca. He said nothing. I thought that was enough. A dying woman's words should have been enough. But I had known Grant too long to rely on should. 2 days later, I asked Mom if she wanted to put it in writing. She nodded. We made a simple handwritten note. I, Margaret Lane Whitmore, want my Baldwin upright piano to go to my daughter Rebecca Lane. She signed. I signed as witness. Our neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, signed too when she brought soup. Grant refused. Not openly. He said he did not want to participate in death paperwork. Fine. We had signatures without him. I sent a photo to myself. Saved it in 3 places. Tucked the original into Mom's sheet music bench. That was my mistake. I should have taken it out. But the bench felt safe because Mom felt near. After Mom died, everything became muffled. The hospital, the funeral home, the calls, the strange administrative violence of death certificates. Grant became efficient. Too efficient. He wanted clothes donated immediately, books boxed, medical equipment removed, flowers thrown away once they wilted. He said it was unhealthy to keep things frozen. I said grief was not a freezer. He ignored that. We agreed to hold a memorial gathering 4 weeks later, after her former students could travel. Mom had asked for music and cake. I planned the program. Former colleagues offered to sing. I chose photos. I asked Grant to wait before clearing the front room, especially the piano. Rebecca, he said, I am the one living in the house. And I am the one she left the piano to. His jaw tightened. We'll discuss it after the memorial. Good. I should have recognized that we'll discuss meant I will act before you can stop me. The week after Mom died, I returned to Des Moines for 3 days to meet work deadlines and sleep in a bed that did not smell like hospice lotion. Grant texted me twice. First, I'm beginning to tidy some things. Nothing major. Then, do you want any sheet music or just the piano itself? I replied, do not move, sell, donate, or discard anything from the piano or bench. I'll be back Friday. He sent a thumbs up. The thumbs up of doom. On Saturday, Emily called. I drove to her house that night with my hands shaking and the handwritten note photo open on my phone. Emily lived in a craftsman bungalow 20 minutes outside town. Warm, porch light, children's rain boots by the door, the kind of house where a piano might be loved. She opened the door before I knocked. Rebecca? Yes. She hugged me. A stranger hugged me more gently than my stepfather had in 19 days. I'm so sorry. Thank you. The piano stood in her front room, slightly angled near a window, wrapped still in moving blankets around the bottom. The sight of it made my knees weak. There it was. Mom's piano, our contract piano, in someone else's house. I walked toward it slowly. The chipped corner, the water ring, the little scratch on the side from when I moved a music stand too carelessly at 14. I placed my hand on the top. For a second, I expected warmth. Wood is not a body. Grief forgets. Emily's husband, Mark, stood quietly near the doorway. Our mover noticed the carving when they lifted it, he said. He said some kid loved this thing. I crouched down. Emily handed me a flashlight. There, underneath, carved into the frame, Rebecca, and beside it, Mom's tiny heart. I touched the rough lines with one finger. I was 8 again. Thunder outside. Wood shavings on my shirt. Mom crawling under the piano in her blue robe. A contract. I cried under a stranger's piano. Emily knelt beside me. We won't keep it from you, she said. I could barely answer. Thank you. She brought me the box from the bench. Inside were sheet music books, old recital programs, 2 photos, Mom's pencil, a silk scarf, and several envelopes. But not the handwritten note. Grant had removed it. Of course he had. He had sold the piano, but he had checked the bench first. He had taken the one document that made Mom's promise obvious, and left behind everything he did not think could accuse him. He missed the carving, because Grant never looked underneath. I showed Emily the photo of the note on my phone. She read it carefully. This was in the bench? Yes. And now it's gone? Yes. She looked angry. Good. I paid him through a bank transfer, she said. I have his listing, messages, and receipt. He said he had full authority to sell. Can you send me everything? Of course. I offered again, to repay the $800. Emily refused again. Let me talk to my husband, she said. We bought it because our daughter wants to learn piano. But not like this. Her voice broke slightly. I would never want someone doing this to my child. That sentence undid me, because my mother had spent her life teaching children music, and now another mother was protecting a daughter's promise to learn. We agreed I would speak to an attorney before moving anything. Emily said the piano could stay safely in her home as long as needed. Then she asked if I wanted a few minutes alone. I sat at the bench, the same bench. My knees remembered its height. I opened the fallboard. The keys were slightly yellowed. Middle C still stuck. I pressed it. It rose slowly. I laughed through tears. Still stubborn. I played the first notes of Clair de Lune. Badly. My hands shook too hard. But a little counted. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever had someone try to sell, donate, or erase something your loved one promised you, you know what Rebecca felt in that stranger's front room. It was not about resale value. It was about the difference between an old object and a promise that still had fingerprints on it. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what object in your family carried more love than money. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. I called Grant from Emily's driveway. He answered on the 4th ring. Rebecca, you sold the piano. Silence, then a sigh. I was going to tell you. No, you weren't. I needed space in the house. Mom's memorial is next weekend. I know that. She wanted the piano there. She is gone, Rebecca. The sentence was so cold I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second. Then I put it back. She left it to me. There was no formal will provision. I have her handwritten note. Another silence, shorter this time. No, you don't. There it was. The admission hiding inside denial. I said, Emily found my name carved underneath. Grant inhaled sharply. I almost smiled. For the first time since Mom died, he sounded surprised. She called me, I said. She had no right. She had more right than you. His voice hardened. That piano was in my house. I handled it. You sold property, Mom promised to me. Promised is not ownership. Then why did you remove the note from the bench? He did not answer. Rain tapped against my windshield. I continued. I'm contacting an attorney. He laughed once. Over an old piano? No, Grant. Over theft, estate interference, and the removal of personal property documentation. The piano is just the part you thought was too sentimental to fight over. You are grieving and not thinking clearly. I looked at Emily's house, warm light spilling around the curtains, Mom's piano inside. I am grieving, I said, and thinking very clearly. Then I hung up. The attorney's name was Patricia Hayes. She had handled my father's estate years earlier and remembered Mom. When I called, she said, "Margaret with the piano?" That made me cry before I could explain. I sent her everything: photo of the handwritten note, texts telling Grant not to move the piano, Emily's messages with Grant, bank transfer receipt, photos of the carving, photos of the recital programs in the bench. Patricia reviewed it and said, quote, "Legally, this will depend on estate documents, ownership, marital property, and whether the piano can be treated as specifically gifted personal property. But practically, Grant has a problem." What kind? He sold an item under dispute after being told not to move it, removed a note that may show intent, and represented authority to sell while knowing you claimed it. Also, the buyer is cooperative. That helps. What do we do? We send a demand letter first. I liked Patricia immediately for saying we. The letter went out Monday morning. It demanded that Grant preserve all estate property, return the handwritten piano note, reimburse Emily, cooperate in transferring the piano to me, and refrain from disposing of any items belonging to Margaret Lane Whitmore until inventory was completed. Grant called within 2 hours. I did not answer. He left a voicemail. "Rebecca, involving lawyers is unnecessary. Your mother would be very upset." There it was, the dead woman deployed as shield. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Patricia. She replied, "Do not engage by phone. Beautiful." Grant then texted, "The piano was burdensome. You live in an apartment." I made a practical decision. I replied, "All communication through Patricia Hayes." He wrote, "You're being childish." I did not answer. He wrote, "Margaret would hate this." I did not answer. He wrote, "Fine. Come get your sentimental furniture." I sent that to Patricia too. The memorial was Saturday. Grant tried to cancel the music. Not openly. He said the house was not ready, and the piano was unavailable, so perhaps we should do a simple reception at a restaurant. I said no. Mom wanted music and cake. We held it at her school auditorium instead. Former students came. Teachers came. Neighbors came. Parents of children she had taught decades earlier came with grown sons and daughters who still remembered singing "This Little Light of Mine" in her classroom. Emily came too. I had invited her because she had become part of the piano's rescue, whether she wanted to or not. She brought her daughter, Nora, age 9, who held a bouquet of yellow daisies and looked shy. Grant arrived late. He looked polished and annoyed. He had expected a small grieving circle he could manage. Instead, he found an auditorium full of people whose lives Mom had touched before he ever entered hers. Good. The program began with the school choir singing. Then Mom's friend Linda played a recording of Mom accompanying a spring concert 15 years earlier. Her piano filled the room through old speakers, warm and imperfect and alive. I watched Grant from the side aisle. He looked uncomfortable. Maybe because everyone heard what he had sold. Maybe because, for once, Mom's value could not be reduced to space in his living room. When it was my turn to speak, I stood at the podium with my notes shaking in my hands. I did not mention Grant by name. That would have made the speech about him. I talked about Mom, about her classroom, about soup, about the piano, about how she believed every child deserved a song before shame could silence them. Then I said, when I was 8, I carved my name under Mom's piano during a thunderstorm. Instead of scolding me, she carved a heart beside it and called it our contract. She told me that love sometimes leaves marks where no one thinks to look. Emily began crying. So did I. Grant stared at the floor. After the service, people came up to share stories. One former student said Mom taught him to sing, after a teacher told him he was tone deaf. Another said Mom kept snacks in her desk for kids who forgot lunch. Nora, Emily's daughter, came to me with the daisies. My mom said your mom was a music teacher. Yes. I want to learn piano. I knelt. My mom would have loved that. Are you getting your piano back? I looked at Emily, who stood behind her. Yes, I said. I think so. Nora nodded seriously. Good, promises matter. Children understand more than adults hope. Grant tried to speak to me near the refreshment table. Rebecca. Patricia told me not to speak with you about estate property. This isn't estate property talk, it's family. I looked at him. You sold my family. His face hardened. That is unfair. No, it is exact. He stepped closer. You think your mother was only yours. No, I think the piano was. He glanced around. People were watching. He lowered his voice. You embarrassed me today with that carving story. I smiled sadly. Grant, I told a true story about my mother. If it embarrassed you, ask yourself why. He walked away. The following week, Patricia arranged a meeting. Grant resisted returning the note. He claimed he did not know what note we meant. Then Patricia showed him the photo. He said maybe it had been misplaced. Then she showed him my text, specifically telling him not to move anything from the piano or bench. Then Emily's buyer messages, where Grant wrote, No family claims on this. Need gone quickly. No family claims. That phrase did more damage than anything, because it proved he knew exactly what a claim would be. Patricia said calmly, Mr. Whitmore, litigation over an upright piano may sound disproportionate until we include removal of documentation, misrepresentation to a buyer, and broader estate inventory concerns. My client prefers resolution. Do you? Grant stared at her. I said nothing. That was satisfying. Not silence from fear. Silence because someone else was paid to hold the line. Grant agreed to return the handwritten note, reimburse Emily the purchase price plus moving costs, and allow piano transfer to my possession. He also agreed to a full inventory of Mom's personal items before any disposal. He did not apologize. Men like Grant often confuse surrender with insult. Emily refused reimbursement from me, but accepted it from Grant. Good. The piano moved to my apartment 3 weeks later. Getting it up the stairs cost more than $800 and required 4 professional movers, 2 neighbors holding doors, 1 scratched wall, and my landlord saying, That better not be as loud as it is heavy. I placed it against the wall near my living room window. It overwhelmed the room. Grant had been right about that. He had been wrong about everything else. That first night, I sat on the bench with Mom's handwritten note in a frame beside me. I opened the lid, pressed middle C. Still sticky, I played badly for an hour. Then I called Emily. It's home, I said. She cried. I'm so glad. Would Nora like lessons? There was a pause. Are you serious? My mom would haunt me if I kept the piano only for grief. Emily laughed. She would love that. So every other Saturday, Nora came to my apartment for beginner piano lessons. I am not my mother. I do not have her patience. I correct finger positions too quickly and forget children need stickers. But Nora loved the piano, especially after I showed her the carving underneath. Your name is inside it, she said. Under it. Same thing. Maybe. A month after the piano came home, Grant sent a final text. I hope you're satisfied. Margaret would not have wanted conflict. I stared at it. Then I replied. Margaret wanted me to have the piano. Then I blocked him. The estate inventory revealed more. Not dramatic stolen fortune. Small erasures. Mom's classroom scrapbooks in the garage, damp from being moved carelessly. Her jewelry box missing 2 brooches Grant claimed he had given to a cousin. Sheet music donated to a church without asking. Her recipe box placed in a trash bag labeled kitchen clutter. Kitchen clutter. My grandmother's lemon cake recipe was in that box. I recovered it. The brooches, too, after Patricia sent another letter. The sheet music was partly gone, but some returned because the church secretary had more sense than Grant and saved the personal notations. Each recovery felt like pulling Mom back from being flattened into Grant's convenience. I learned something then. People can grieve someone and still erase them. Grant may have loved my mother in his way, but he loved order more. He loved control more. He loved being unbothered more. And after she died, the parts of her that did not serve him became clutter. I refused to let my mother become clutter. The public payoff happened 6 months later at the school's spring music night. They named the elementary music room after Mom. The Margaret Lane Music Room. Not Margaret Whitmore. Lane. Her teaching name. Her real professional name. Grant came because the school invited him as surviving spouse. I came because the school invited me as daughter. Emily and Nora came because Nora had started playing in the beginner recital. In the hallway outside the music room, a display case held photos of Mom teaching through the years. Children singing. Mom at the piano. Mom conducting with one hand and holding a tissue box in the other. Mom laughing beside the old upright during a holiday concert. The last photo in the case was new. My piano, in my apartment, with Nora sitting at it, looking serious over her first music book. Below it, a caption. Margaret Lane's legacy continues through the piano she promised to her daughter Rebecca, now used to teach the next generation. I did not write that caption. The principal did. Apparently, Emily had told her the story. Grant read it. His face went still. I stood beside him. For once, I said nothing. He looked at me. You told them? I looked at the display. I told the truth. Other people remembered it. He swallowed. The door to the music room opened, and children's voices spilled into the hallway. Nora ran out. Rebecca, I played the whole song without stopping. I knelt and hugged her. I heard. It was a little fast. A little counts. Grant heard that too. His eyes flicked to me. Maybe he remembered Mom saying it, maybe not. I no longer needed him to remember correctly. The room did, the piano did, I did. Nora played on my mother's piano for 2 years before her family bought their own keyboard. By then, I had started teaching 3 other children on Saturday mornings. Not professionally, not yet, but enough that my apartment sounded like missed notes, laughter, and pencils tapping rhythms on paper. The piano is still too big for the room. The middle C still sticks. The water ring remains on the top because I will not sand away evidence of Mom's chamomile tea. The carving underneath is still there. Rebecca, heart. Sometimes, when grief is sharp, I crawl under and touch it. I am 34 years old, and sometimes I sit under a piano like an 8-year-old in a thunderstorm. I am not embarrassed by that. Some contracts are kept with signatures. Some are kept with scars. Some are kept with a child's name, carved, where no one can pretend it was never there. The final lesson is not that every heirloom must be kept forever. Objects are not people. Pianos are heavy, houses are small. Grief can become storage if you let fear make every item sacred. But some objects carry specific promises. Some hold the sound of a person's hands. Some were named before death made them disputed. Some were marked with love long before a stepfather decided sentiment had no resale value. My stepdad sold my mom's piano after she died. The buyer found my name carved underneath. And because a stranger had more respect for a promise than the man living in my mother's house, the piano came home before it disappeared for good. Grant thought he was selling old furniture. He forgot to look underneath. That is where my mother left the contract. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know some of you have lost heirlooms, letters, jewelry, tools, recipes, instruments, photos, or furniture because someone decided your grief was impractical and your memories were clutter. If Rebecca's story reached you, I hope you remember that love leaves evidence. Keep photos of notes, save messages, ask witnesses to sign, look underneath the things that matter. And when someone tries to sell what was promised to you, let the marks, the documents, and the people with integrity help bring it home. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the moment one hidden carving tells the truth. So tell me, if your stepfather sold the piano your mother promised you and the buyer found your childhood name carved underneath, would you let it go to avoid conflict? Or would you follow that carving all the way home?